was Invictus, I would just think, enough. You know, when are we going to focus on what you're actually coming for? And what's going to be interesting is, and mark my words on this, is this now a private visit? Who's funding this visit? Because if they're being funded via that particular charity, one might suggest they're not getting their money's worth.
She has such a bad reputation, and she needs that proximity to the royal family so that she can continue to play Meghan, Duchess of Sussex.
Prince Harry's total breakdown and break from reality has continued overnight, because not only is he breaking down in tears again during his holiday to Portugal, he has now leaked a private security document to Chris Shipp of Woke ITV, which has been broadcast to the world. And the nutty thing about this is he is literally saying, I'm a terrorist target. Come and attack me. Come and attack my children.
I've got a message for Harry and Meghan. No one in Britain gives a rat's backside whether you come or not. You guys are over. You're all very excited by that. Then suddenly, last Friday into Saturday, they start saying, Harry says, oh, well, I've just found out I might, well, effectively said, I've just found out I'm not going to get armed police protection. That armed police protection I've been fighting in the courts to get for the last 2-3 years. In that case, I'm not going to bring the kids back, and I'm not bringing Meghan back. King, heartbroken, bewildered, distraught.
Harry may have survived years of royal warfare, courtroom battles, security controversies, and brutal headlines, but now the pressure is allegedly creeping into the one institution that has always looked like his safest ground, Invictus, because a sensational new rumor claims questions about money and transparency have become so uncomfortable behind the scenes that Harry could now be facing something nobody expected, an alleged deadline for answers. And before this goes any further, that deadline claim has not been publicly confirmed by the Invictus Games Foundation, which makes what happens next even more intriguing, because the real story is not simply what somebody supposedly demanded behind closed doors. It is why a rumor like this suddenly feels believable enough to explode in the first place. Look at the timing. Harry is already walking into a storm involving his relationship with Britain, his security battle, questions surrounding another possible UK visit, and the deeply emotional possibility of King Charles seeing his grandchildren again. Yet underneath all that royal noise, another controversy has been quietly gathering heat, and this one strikes directly at the organization most closely associated with Harry's post-royal identity. Invictus was supposed to be different. It was supposed to rise above palace feuds, celebrity drama, and endless Sussex controversy, because its purpose was always bigger than any individual personality, wounded, injured, and sick service personnel. But once questions about funding, governance, and transparency enter the conversation, suddenly every distraction becomes harder to ignore. Every unexplained detail attracts another question, and every whisper about internal frustration starts sounding louder. And that contrast could hardly be more dramatic. While the royal family continues appearing together at ceremonial events, Harry remains physically and symbolically separated from that old world, attempting to build an independent identity thousands of miles away. Yet Invictus has remained the bridge connecting him to public service. That is precisely why this rumored development would matter so much if there were ever evidence behind it. Losing influence inside Invictus would not merely represent another ugly headline. It would hit the centerpiece of Harry's public mission, the project repeatedly presented as proof that whatever happened with the monarchy, there was still something substantial, personal, and meaningful that belonged to him. But here is where the whispers become combustible. The original controversy already contained something very real: public questions surrounding financial planning, governance, and transparency, alongside online criticism arguing that Harry's personal controversies have sometimes overshadowed the veterans themselves. Now imagine that atmosphere colliding with an unverified claim that people inside the organization have supposedly grown tired of questions accumulating without sufficiently clear answers. Suddenly, the fictional rumor practically writes its own ultimatum: explain the financial picture, restore confidence, or face uncomfortable conversations about Harry's future prominence. Again, there is no established evidence presented here that the Invictus board actually issued such an ultimatum. But gossip does not wait politely for board minutes. It feeds on tension. And there is plenty of tension available, because Harry is simultaneously fighting another battle over security, insisting that his circumstances require protection arrangements that have themselves become the subject of enormous public argument. Critics keep examining his travels, his appearances, and his decisions, looking for contradictions, while supporters argue that a prince with Harry's history history faces circumstances ordinary celebrities simply do not understand. Either way, the result is the same. Another complicated controversy follows him everywhere, and that becomes particularly dangerous for Invictus because charities survive not merely on passion, but confidence, governance, partnerships, and an ability to convince supporters that the mission remains bigger than the personalities attached to it. Now add the money question. Not an accusation that money disappeared, not proof of wrongdoing, something much more slippery and, in gossip terms, almost more powerful, questions. Questions about financial commitments, questions about spending priorities, questions about future planning, questions about whether public attention is being directed toward the veterans or repeatedly dragged back toward Harry's personal battles. The source material itself describes calls for greater transparency around spending, financial planning, and future priorities, while noting that some online critics want Harry to step back from a prominent Invictus role. That does not prove a board rebellion, but it creates exactly the environment where rumors of one can spread like wildfire. And then comes the alleged deadline. According to the invented rumor now driving this scenario, Harry supposedly has limited time to satisfy concerns before discussions about his role become more serious. No verified document, no confirmed board statement, no publicly identified director stepping forward and saying this deadline exists. Yet, if that rumor were suddenly followed by an unusual statement about governance, an unexpected leadership meeting, or a noticeable change in Harry's public role, every tiny movement would immediately be examined as a clue. Harry's defenders could reasonably ask whether this is simply another attempt to transform ordinary organizational scrutiny into a personal scandal. After all, large international charitable organizations deal with budgets, government commitments, sponsors, logistical costs, and governance questions routinely. Asking financial questions is not the same thing as accusing Harry of financial misconduct, and discussing organizational direction is certainly not proof that anybody wants him removed, because Invictus cannot afford to become another battlefield in the Sussex story. The moment audiences begin discussing Harry more than the veterans, the organization faces the exact perception problem critics have been warning about. If the rumored deadline is completely fictional noise, clarity could kill it quickly. But if genuine internal disagreements ever emerge independently, this rumor suddenly becomes the opening chapter of something much larger. And this is where the rumored deadline suddenly becomes far more explosive, because the argument is no longer just about accounting questions whispered across social media. It crashes directly into the veterans themselves. Canadian veteran Scott Snow has publicly described suffering a serious spinal injury during the Invictus Games, and according to Scott Snow's account, attempts were later made to contact both Prince Harry and the Invictus organization about concerns considered important, without the response that was apparently hoped for. Invictus has not publicly confirmed those reported communications, but Scott Snow's experience has nevertheless become part of a wider and increasingly uncomfortable conversation when Harry and Meghan dominate the headlines. Are the wounded competitors being pushed into the background? Critics insist the money available around an organization like this could mean rehabilitation, housing assistance, employment opportunities, family support, and mental health services, which is precisely why questions about spending and governance can become emotionally combustible so quickly. Prince Harry now finds those questions colliding with the invented rumor of a supposed deadline, although there remains no verified evidence that such an ultimatum has actually been issued. That distinction matters, but it has not stopped speculation from racing ahead, because online frustration was already visible before this rumored deadline entered the picture. Some critics have openly argued that Prince Harry should reduce his prominent public role because controversy surrounding Harry and Meghan risks becoming louder than the mission itself, while supporters reject that conclusion and point toward years of involvement in the games. Then the comparisons become even sharper. Supporters of the royal family point toward Princess Catherine and the reception surrounding Wimbledon, describing her gradual return to public engagements as a quieter image of service and resilience, including discussions surrounding the Three Peaks Challenge, while Prince William is similarly presented by supporters as embracing a lower-key model of public duty. Against that backdrop, Harry's legal disputes and security arguments remain a relentless part of the public conversation, and suddenly an alleged Invictus deadline, even one that remains completely unverified, lands in an environment already overflowing with suspicion. Then comes another pressure point. A decision in Prince Harry's privacy litigation involving the Daily Mail has been anticipated, meaning Harry could potentially be dealing with intense legal attention during a United Kingdom visit connected with Invictus events. Reports have suggested Harry may learn the outcome shortly before a public announcement, and if the decision were unfavorable, the spectacle could become enormous. Harry in the UK, Invictus under scrutiny, financial questions circulating, and a completely separate rumor claiming internal patience is running out. That does not prove the rumor. It explains why the rumor is so combustible, and Harry would hardly be walking into a quiet family environment either. Speculation continues around Meghan's future plans and King Charles's health, meaning a visit that might ordinarily have been presented as another opportunity for reconciliation could instead become the moment several controversies collide at once. Prince Harry would be confronting questions about his public role, while the organization associated most strongly with his charitable identity faces calls for clarity about governance, finances, and future direction. That brings everything to the question nobody can avoid. What happens if pressure continues rising? Some commentators have already mentioned Mike Tindall as someone who could potentially hold a more prominent future role, although there is no confirmed campaign to install him and no established evidence that Harry's position is being handed to anybody. Still, once that name enters the conversation, every rumor about leadership suddenly acquires another layer. Critics can imagine succession. Supporters can call it manufactured drama, and the organization itself remains trapped between both narratives while trying to keep attention on wounded, injured, and sick service personnel. Ultimately, that is why the supposed deadline matters as gossip even without confirmation. If nothing changes, the story may collapse under the weight of its own speculation. But if Invictus announces governance changes, releases new financial clarification, alters Harry's responsibilities, or responds directly to growing criticism, people will immediately return to this rumor and ask whether somebody knew something beforehand. Harry's UK visit, the legal developments, and the Invictus debate are therefore moving toward the same uncomfortable crossroads. And Harry's next appearance could be examined less for what is said openly than for what remains unsaid.